Rob, alcoholic, from New York City
Yeah.
/ Connecticut. Connecticut's the other tri-state of the tri-state area of New York City. We're usually forgotten. I'm used to that. Sorry. This is my first time on an online meeting, and wow, I know it says somewhere in the big book in the beginning how technology is just taking AA to places that it would never be imagined. So here we are, and I thank you guys for all the effort in making this happen. My stats would be my anniversary is October 21st of 1987. I was 19 years old, and I'll do all the math for you right now. That means I just celebrated 30 years, and that makes me 49. So you can stop doing that math right now. And I attribute everything to the people in the rooms and the rooms and the fellowship that just took me to where I am today. I literally have been brought from one place to the next by the people in the program. So, none of that is clear to me until I look back on it in hindsight, but it's absolutely true. My last day was me doing things that I swore I wasn't going to ever do again. And I was hanging out with a buddy of mine, a neighborhood buddy of mine, who was fresh out of rehab and on a relapse with me and getting loaded. And so here I am doing things I swore I wasn't going to do. He had, we were driving up this stretch of road in Connecticut called the Merritt Parkway, and the Merritt Parkway is tree lined and has like these little paths that you can pull off, right? And we thought that was going to be a good idea to go and party in the woods, if you would, because that's what you do at 19, right? In Connecticut, you party in the woods. And so here we are, we're sitting in the car, we're partying, and he looks at me at some point and says something along the lines of, there's a meeting tomorrow I know about. Maybe we should go. And I said, well, why would you ever bring something up like that? That makes no sense. That's preposterous. Here, just please continue on with what we were doing. And that was the end of that night. The next day, I remember I went to work, and I was, again, doing something I swore I wasn't going to ever do again. And that was try to get high during my lunch break, right? So here I am again in the woods, trying to get loaded and not catching the buzz. Not like it wasn't working is basically what it had come down to. So faced with that dilemma, I didn't know what else to do, but something just went through my head, what Joey had said the night before about, this meeting. And I'm telling you, it was like the first moment that I felt like this, like, lift off of my shoulder, that there was some hope. There was just a little bit of hope. And I truly believe in that moment, I exercised the first 3 steps perfectly. I haven't done it since in my entire sobriety, quite as perfect as that. But in that moment, if I put it as simply as I can't, you can, and maybe I'll let you, that was the moment that I said that. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. Maybe this meeting that Joey's talking about can do it, and I'll go to that meeting. So I went back to work, and I called him. There were no cell phones then. And I remember I called him and I reminded him. I was like, what about that meeting? He's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, no, dude, you were talking about this meeting last night. And I said, oh, yeah, that's all right. Cool. So I'll come and pick you up and we can get loaded, because it's a rule. You can go to your first meeting high, right? So it was good. It was good advice, right? So he comes and he picks me up, and and we go out into the woods and we try to get loaded again. I'm not feeling it, but nevertheless, we're going through the motions. And I got to go home and I got to shower and get ready for this meeting. I got to get dressed up for this meeting. And I am driving with Joey, and I said something like, "Wouldn't it be funny if like the cops pulled us over right now?" And he said, "That's not funny. You shouldn't say things like that. That's not funny." Um, and we pull onto my street, and I lived up at the top of this little hill, and there were two squad cars sitting in front of my house. Now, of course, Joey freaks out. He wants me to take him home. I'm panicked. I'm pulling into my neighbor's first driveway and throwing everything that I have in the car into the bushes. The neighbors are looking out at me like, "What the hell is this kid doing? Why is he freaking out?" I drive Joey home, and I had a half a tank of gas and a about $60 in my pocket. And the thought was like, maybe I could just make a run for it at this point. The trouble with that was that in that moment, I had already tasted the freedom of hope, and it was I was at a crossroads, right? Like it was, and as I understand it now, and I look back on it now, it was the happy joys and freedom of letting go of this, and admitting defeat to this disease, or going to jail, which I now understand: jails, institutions, and death. So I decided I was just going to just face the music, right? Like I didn't know what else to do. And I ended up, I figured I figured I knew what was going to happen at this point. Cops are going to pull me out. All the neighbors are going to know, I'm going to be humiliated in front of my, neighborhood. And I pull into the driveway and the cops don't get out. And I'm like, oh man, they're going to wait. And they're wait till I'm inside. And then they're going to tell my dad everything that I've been doing. And like, I'm freaking out. And sure enough, my dad was standing right there when I walked in the door, and he's not saying anything. I'm sweating bullets. I'm looking out the window. He's probably just thinking I'm loaded again. And well, I was loaded again. And I figured, I look out the window one last time, and the two squad cars pull away. Now, I don't understand, or I certainly didn't understand what a white light experience was, but at that moment, it's pretty clear. Like the second time that I had driven around that block when I had decided to go face the music, the last thing that I said was, "God, please get me through this. I swear I'll go to my next meeting. I'll go to this meeting." So I hang on to that. Well, with the cops gone, I called Joey. He's like, "Great, okay, come around, pick me up." And there we are driving off to the meeting. And this goes to where the message comes from, because on that car ride to the meeting, Joey was so perfect. Like he had been in the meetings. He was younger than me, even. He was about a year younger than me. But he'd carried the message to me at that point, like, and in the form of, like, as we're driving to this meeting, he's coaching me, right, on what the meeting is going to look like, as so that I don't feel like a fool when I walk into the meeting. And he tells me things like, "Well, they're going to want to hug you, and it's not a gay thing. They just, they just want to give you a welcome, and they're gonna all want to give you their phone number. So just take their phone numbers. It's fine." And then he's like, "Oh, and you should probably get a sponsor too, right?" So here's a kid, high as a kite, coaching me on the way to the meeting on what I'm supposed to be doing, right? And so we get to this meeting, and it was St. Barnabas Church, Tuesday night men's meeting. And I never felt like I fit in, and I certainly didn't fit in with fellows, men, and but none of that mattered. And they hugged me and they gave me their number. And one guy had the meeting list, and he was talking to me. I don't know, maybe just a little too long, where I just finally said, "Okay, well, will you be my sponsor?" And of course, his eyes like light up, like, oh, I got a live one now. And I've never called him in 30 years. So, like, but the idea was that I was instructed and I had no other place to go than to just listen to what you guys tell me. So, life got good really fast. And about day 5 or so, I had a girlfriend, ironic right now, and I'll explain that why. We were skipping meetings. We skipped a meeting in between. I was like, okay. But it was a Friday night, and Joey and my girlfriend at the time had looked at me and said, oh, we're going to go to a keg party. Do you want to go? And of course, I knew that was exactly the opposite of what you guys have been telling me. And I said, well, I'll let you know tomorrow. And I went into my car and I cried my eyes out. Because at that point, I was all alone. I had nobody. That was my entire network right there. My support group was gone. And so Saturday morning came along, and the only thing I had was a pocket full of phone numbers, right? And I just start dialing it up, and finally one guy answers, Jesse, and he starts asking me questions like, so how you doing? I'm like, I'm great. And what are you up to? I'm like, oh, I'm busy and I got stuff. And he's like, you want to come play basketball? I'm like, nah, I don't want to play basketball. I don't play basketball. And you're like, well, my roommate and I are going to do that, and then we're going to go to lunch. You want to come? I'm like, I don't know, And he's like, and then he just cut it back and he said, tell you what, what's your address? We're coming to get you. And no shit, that guy showed up at my house with his roommate and his basketball and just let me sit on the side of the basketball court. And they were chatting me up, and they took me to lunch, and they said, oh yeah, there's a dance tonight. And I said, a dance? Oh, I'm not, like, do you want to go? And I'm like, no, I don't want to dance. I am so not about dancing. And they said, like, oh no, but it's a Halloween dance. I'm like, oh, I am so not going to be a Halloween dance person. But he said, that's okay. We all just meet there, and you can make your mind up when you get to the meeting. Well, that was a trap. Because I did show up, and of course I went to the dance.
What
and it was
the fuck?
And it was awkward. And I remember this lady and her daughter end up coming up to me, and they're like, wow, you're cute. You want to come dance with us? And I only make a mention of that because I kept that phone list that I had. All my friends lived with their parents. So I went back to that old phone list about 20 years later, and I called, and it was Mrs. Smith. And I said, hey, Mrs. Smith, this is Rob. I don't know if you remember me. And she goes, oh, wait a minute. You're a crazy blonde-haired dancing Rob, aren't you? So that started my illustrious career for 2 years of going to AA dances, and with fellowship and campouts and pig roasts and meetings, of course, tons of meetings. I joined a step study group. I was on a race to get my 4th step done, right? Like Tommy was going to do his 4th step before mine, and I wasn't going to let that happen. So I made sure I got my 4th step done before his. It's not a race, but that's what motivated me. So what? All of those people that I remember, I remember well, and I can remember their names, and I can turn to those people in all of this time, so many years later, and know that I'm part of this fellowship whenever I feel most alone. I got to do some fast forwarding here, right? There's a lot of ground to cover. Here's my warning. There's 2 things that seem to get in my way. One is romance, the other is finance, right? And at about year 8, I was very busy with work, very, very busy. And I had just moved to this godforsaken town of New York, and the meetings weren't the same, and the people weren't the way I remember. And some guy yelled at me for spilling coffee on the floor and not cleaning it up fast enough. And he had a suit on, and I was like, I'll show you guys. I'm not going to meetings. And I didn't for 4 years. Not good. And at the end of that 4 years, I was at the end of that 4 years, I was on my balcony in here in New York, and had a stepladder and Windex out, and I was thinking maybe I could just make it look like I fell. And I didn't want to use. I knew better than that, but I didn't want to be anymore. And then I called somebody up in Connecticut, one of these people, and they listened to me ramble about 20 minutes or so. And then they finally asked me, like, so when was the last meeting you went to? And I said, well, obviously you're not listening to me because that's not it. But Smart Feet took me to the next meeting, and it was a slow boat to get back in the middle of. And all I knew what to do was like become of service. I asked if I could be their greeter, and they said yes. And then I said, "Can I make your coffee?" And they said yes. And it wasn't until about year 15 that I finally made it to my now home group, Never Had a Legal Drink. And I walked into a young people's meeting, and I realized I forgot how to talk like this, how to be honest like this, right? And I look at it as like a Peter Pan syndrome. Like I'm Wendy, and Wendy got out of Neverland and forgot how to fly. And then all of a sudden I come back into legal, and I'm like, oh snap, I totally remember I could fly. And you guys taught me how to be honest again and open. And I had shit tons of service opportunity, because why wouldn't I help people that are 19 and coming into meetings? That's what you guys did for me. Beyond my wildest dreams, part of that is we had the good fortune of hosting New York City ECPA, and I was the hotel chair. And that gave me the privilege of standing up in the middle of the room of 2,000 screaming people, and I looked down into the middle of the room, and the state that had won the most had gotten the most registrations won the right to pick the spot they wanted to sit, and that happened to be right in front of the stage. And I recognized their logo because it's from where all my in-laws are from, and that was from Pennsylvania. So I go down and I say hello to them, and um, I congratulate them, I welcome them, and I said, "Oh, can I get your number? I think I may, need to give you a call, because you see, the thing is, my nephew is in rehab right now, and I'm kind of scared, right?" And so, of course, they gave me their numbers, and they took mine, and we texted, and we stayed in touch. And his mom, my nephew's mom, called, about 2 weeks later, and said he got kicked out of rehab and he's tired and he doesn't want to go to a meeting. And I dialed these guys up in Pittsburgh, and they rolled up to his house, and they picked him up and they took him to his first YPA meeting. And he had never been to a YPA meeting before, and he had never identified with the alcoholics. But this time he came back and he's like, holy shit, I never knew this existed. And that's the beauty of AA. The thing of it was that, had you told me a year ago, like, Rob, we need you to do this because it's going to save your nephew's life, I said, fuck yeah, I'll do something like that. But the thing of it is, I don't know when that moment is going to come or who I'm going to help. So, of course, I have to sign up for service whenever I'm asked. And so that's why I'm here now. And that's why I'm talking to you guys. Thanks.